Market Journal, television for agricultural business decisions, is a presentation of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine. Partial funding provided by the Nebraska Soybean Board.
Well, thanks so much for joining us here on another edition of Market Journal. I'm Bryce Duskett. Happy New Year to you. We're excited to be back for the beginning of the new year. And on today's show, it's a new edition of our Crop Talk segment, plus a look at the markets and weather. We'll also hear from a former Secretary of Agriculture as he breaks down what we can expect from the 2023 Farm Bill. We'll get to those stories coming up here in a moment, but first. Finding dependable labor on the farm or ranch can certainly be a challenging task. One company, though, is on a mission to try to alleviate that burden for producers. When it comes to baling, there are certainly a number of man-hours associated with the task of moving bales around the field. At the recent Nebraska AG Expo, the folks at Vermeer were on hand at the New Innovation Hub. There they were demonstrating how their latest innovation is bringing robotics to the round bale. Well, one of the stars of this year's Nebraska AG Expo is here at the Vermeer booth. It is called the Bale Hawk, and Kent joins us now to share with us the details of what's going on behind us. This thing, as I mentioned, star of the show. A lot of people want to know what this thing does and how it works. It is an autonomous bale mover, right? Share with us the details.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. So a lot of our producers and customers are saying it's hard to find labor, and one of the things that are out there is picking up bales, round bales out in the field. It's not the most fun thing to do. It's not generally hard work, but it's kind of monotonous work that you have to do. And so we developed a machine that could go out and in anybody's field, and if you've got bales out there, it'll find them and pick them up and then stack them wherever you would like, for the most part.
So how does it find the bales? How does that system work?
Sure. So we have a sensor suite on the front, but basically right now it's a LiDAR system. So it uses some point cloud stuff and an algorithm to say, yeah, this is a bale. And then once it says it's a bale, we'll navigate to it, pick it up, and then go back to our normal scouring pattern. And once we get 3, we take it to the unloading spot and then go right back to where we stopped. So the goal is it runs basically 24/7, and you don't have to be out there watching it. So.
Where are you at with the development process? Of course, you have it on display here at the Nebraska AG Expo, but can people get their hands on one of these at this point?
No, it's a prototype, so it's not for sale yet. But we're getting closer every season, every year. But we're still, who knows yet? We're actively testing. Could be 1 year, could be 5 years. I'm not real sure yet, but we are getting closer and seeing a lot of interest here, so we're pretty excited about it.
I'm curious, what kind of challenges, as you put that out in the real world and moved 3 bales at a time, what kind of challenges have popped up?
Oh, it's hard to say there. Weather conditions are an issue at times. Some of these sensors have to see through that. That's a big one. Dust can be an issue. In really dusty conditions, been a pretty dry year, so those start to pop up once in a while. But yeah, those are kind of the big ones. Just really getting the sensor package to work with the machine and be accurate. So,
if somebody wants to learn more about the new technology that Vermeer is investing in and has some of these prototypes on display, what's the best way for them to do so?
To be honest, we do have a Forge Innovations section, I think, in our website. I'm pretty sure. I hope our marketing department doesn't get mad at me if I said that wrong, but there is a section there that we actually do have the Bale Hawk on there, and I think the ZR5 is listed there as well. So we do kind of show a few things in that area, but that's probably our best method. So
cool piece of technology on display here at the Nebraska AG Expo. Kent, appreciate your time today.
Appreciate it.
Now, if you'd like to learn more about this autonomous hay bale mover and other innovations being produced by Vermeer, we've attached a helpful link along with this story on the Market Journal website. Well, happening this week, the 118th session of Congress officially kicked off. Lawmakers in the nation's capital are expected to take up many issues this year, and the Farm Bill is among them. Farm bills are a unique opportunity for politicians to work together to address the short and long-term needs facing agriculture. Back at the Nebraska AG Expo, attendees heard a unique perspective on the Farm Bill from a person who has administered, proposed, and passed 3 different farm bills. Former Senator and Secretary of Agriculture Mike Johanns detailed the people, politics, and policy within the Farm Bill. He spoke with my colleague Chad Moyer following his presentation, noting that Republicans and Democrats each have control of a chamber.
But in the end, both sides know that the only way a farm bill is going to get done is if it's bipartisan. You can't pass a Republican farm bill. You can't pass a Democrat farm bill. It's truly going to have to be a collaborative effort when it's all said and done.
What about the leaders in both the House and the Senate? There are some that you had worked with in the past as you worked and helped craft some farm bills. What do we know about the leaders in both the House and the Senate?
On the Senate side, it'll be Debbie Stabenow, and she's great. I mean, she was chair when I was there. She was chair during the last farm bill. She knows her way around. So she's very good, and she knows she has to work with Republicans. The ranking member on the Senate Ag Committee is a gentleman by the name of John Bozeman. John's a good friend. He's based in Arkansas. That's where he comes from. So as I said in my comments, John will take care of southern crops, but he knows also to get a farm bill done, got to get 60 votes. That means it's going to have to be a bipartisan bill. On the House side, change. You know, we go from Democrats in majority to now Republicans. So it'll be a gentleman by the name of Thompson out of Pennsylvania. He will be the chair of the House Ag Committee, and then the former chair, I believe, will become the ranking member.
Let's talk about the policy of the next farm bill. As you look at what will the substance be of the next farm bill, at least what you think or what you gather, is it going to be revolutionary, or will there just be some updates in nature?
I think it's going to be more evolutionary. I don't think you're going to see a tear up the old farm bill and start fresh sort of approach. A lot of programs are working well. Crop insurance would be a perfect example. There are some things that need to be fixed in crop insurance, but having said that, it's a program that farmers are used to, and it has worked well. Here's the battleground, though. And not a lot of people are connected to this, but about 84% of the spending in the Farm Bill isn't for farm programs or conservation. It's actually for nutrition, and most of that goes into what used to be the food stamp program, now the SNAP program. And Democrats won't want to give up on any of that. So I'm just telling everybody that's where the arm wrestling is going to occur until they figure out the path forward.
Now, there are some things that are being talked about in agriculture these days, like regenerative agriculture, and how does the Farm Bill connect with some sustainability or climate change goals? Do you think that's going to be played out in the next Farm Bill?
Yeah, and again, I don't want this to sound like I'm being hyper partisan here, but the reality is Democrats tend to favor strings attached to conservation that would have a positive impact on climate change type issues. Republicans are much more reluctant. Again, I don't see major changes here. I think you'll hear a lot of talk and a lot of debate about it, but in the end, I think you'll see kind of our standard programs.
There are 5 individuals from Nebraska that are elected to represent the state federally in Washington, D.C. How is the representation from Nebraska and to a greater extent maybe the Midwest in crafting the next Farm Bill?
You know, our House members and our senators, they'll play a huge role. I mean, they're from a major ag state, but if I were going to highlight someone, a couple of people, Deb Fisher's just got so much experience, so much credibility. She's got this huge ag pedigree. I mean, when she speaks, people listen because that is her background. She comes from ranch country, and so she speaks with tremendous amount of authority. She's on the ag committee. She'll have influence. And then on the House side, I think all 3 members, even the newest member, Congressman Flood, are going to have influence. No doubt about it. But I would single out Adrian Smith, Don Bacon. They are powerful forces on this kind of debate. So no question about it. The Nebraska delegation will have influence on this Farm Bill. And then at some point we'll find out who the new senator is. believe me, they're going to get thrown in the middle of this very quickly.
Thank you for your comments. Appreciate it very much. Again, Mike Johanns, former senator, former Secretary of Agriculture, was on hand in Lincoln at the Nebraska AG Expo, giving folks an opportunity to hear at least his perspective on how the Farm Bill discussion is going to unfold come in 2023. Chad Moyer reporting.
All right, thank you very much for that story, Chad. Shifting our attention over to the markets now. This week, we're once again joined by Market Analyst Kyle Bumsted. Happy New Year to you, Kyle. Thanks for joining us here on Market Journal.
You bet, Bryce. Happy New Year to you too and all the crew down there, and thanks for having me back.
You guys had some snow up by where you're at, Erickson, Nebraska. How much snow did you get, and what kind of a mess did that create this week?
Well, it kind of depends on what drift and what hill you're behind, but I'd say anywhere from 6 to 10, maybe 12 inches, depends on what side of 91 you're on. But yeah, definitely the wind can stay down for a couple days here until we get a crust on the snow. That would be great.
Let's jump into these markets. I want to talk about the grain market first. As we started 2023, it's been kind of negative for some reason. Why is that, Kyle?
Well, I think a combination of reasons here. Number one, the month of December, we saw some sizable non-commercial buying here. As the last commencement of traders here, we saw the corn long, or they covered a lot of shorts and they went longer on corn. So we did see some non-commercials come in here. But one of the bigger things I'm looking at here is I think there's going to be some grain move here, or has started to move here after the first of the year. We've gotten the calendar flipped. We're 60 days away here from starting to see a lot of dollars move here. Once we get to the 1st of March, we got a lot of fertilizer, some rent, things like that to move here. And also the basis has been fairly strong. It has weakened a little bit as of late, and so has the carry in the market as of late. But I think that's because people are just starting to open the bins up, move some grain here after the first of the year.
What should we be watching in the grain markets to see some positive movement there?
Well, I think we need to kind of keep our eyes on our local basis, also our national cash basis index, which is still at historically high levels. When you look at that over historic level, I believe last night it was somewhere between 6.5 and 7.5 cents over versus the previous Friday's close. I think about 9.5 to 10 cents over, which is historically high on a national basis. So you do need to keep in check your local basis. Also note the carry in the market. Where are we at here as far as March corn versus July corn? Does it pay me to store corn out there? Right now it doesn't, because March is actually a little bit higher price than July, or run about the same price. So, it really doesn't pay to store corn in the bin out to July when they're not giving you more for it.
All right, Kyle, let's shift over to the cattle market. That's where you like to spend some of your time. We like to talk about that when we bring you here on Market Journal. Size up the cattle complex for us right now. How do you see it?
Well, here, as we're talking, we've seen some ups and downs so far this week. We started off in a very negative tone here to start the week, and then towards the middle of the week, we had a nice sizable rally. We were up over $3 here on this March feeder cattle contract, which looks really good. We got up into some new areas here. We filled some upside chart objectives. We filled a gap up there at 188.15 on that March contract. Was able to close just above it there at 188.22 that afternoon. And so the key here is going to be how many feeders are coming to town, which this week did also open up our sale barns in the Southern Plains again, starting here in the middle of the week. We had El Reno. They had a sizable run, about 4,000 head. And so far, looking at that, it looked to be about steady with their last sale of 2022. So that's going in there. But some of our sale barns here in the north may struggle here for yet a couple more days trying to get some cattle to town. But I am seeing some higher dollar feeders out there after the first of the year than we did before we went home for Christmas and kind of closed up the sale barn. So you're talking, there's some 7 weights that were down in Kansas midweek. They were bringing in the $2 range. So that's a pretty good ticket on some of those. And it's just not something you've heard of recently in the southern plains here as far as feeders bringing that. Now, there were some of the northern plains here last week, Christmas and New Year's. There were some 10 and 11 weight cattle brought $1.74, $1.75, but there may be some non-implant things going on with those. I'm not sure, but that's a pretty good ticket here for some of these feeders. And it's about time that the ranchers and the backgrounders got a little bit more.
On that point, Kyle, let's go back to 2022. Venture with me here a little bit. I remember being in January at the Cattle Industry Convention. There was all sorts of high hopes for the year that it was going to be in 2022. In your opinion, did the year live up to its potential?
I think it did in some ways, as we made new contract highs in a lot of these contracts here at the end of the year. So we did see that market go higher. However, I'm not sure as producers and feed yards, they made any more dollars net at the end of the day. We were just handling more dollars in the meantime. And for right now, as we sit here recording this, it does feel that we're somewhat set up the same way. We're going to be handling more dollars with the same amount of margin that we've dealt with in the past.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up where we're sitting today, because that's where I wanted to steer this conversation as we kind of do a big picture outlook on 2023 and what could be ahead here. You really have to manage your costs to get some more dollars, it seems like here, because everything's going up in price, isn't it, Kyle?
Well, that's right. It is. And I know we've seen here start the year off, we've seen a softer tone on grains, and everybody thinks that's great, which it is. If you're feeding cattle, it's your input cost. But how do we tackle that? Because, corn was a higher price when we put it in the pit last fall, or, depending on your situation, everybody's got a different situation, how they calculate cost of feed, cost of gains, things like that. Now, talking to some producers here in Northeast Nebraska here the last couple of weeks, they've said, well, guys are, talking about higher cost of gains and things like that. And we think it's a little bit too high. But another thing that we have to keep in mind is interest has gone up. And so it has freight on a lot of these commodities, whether you're shipping in corn or shipping out cattle, shipping in feeders, whatever it is, shipping costs have gone up too. So we do need to keep that in mind, but our interest rates are going up here. We're about double where we were a year ago on just looking at some of the rates that are out there. I check those rates weekly. We're about double that right now is where we were a year ago. A year ago, we were about 3.25%. And right now we're about 7.5%, closer to 8% on some of those rates as far as prime goes. So that's where your banks are borrowing off of. Some instances you can see some double-digit interest rates out there depending on the operation.
All right, Kyle, 30 seconds or so. Final word is yours. What else do you want to leave our viewers with today?
We also need to keep in mind that demand is very fickle at times when it comes to boxed beef. So you're going to hear a lot about boxed beef, packer margins. We don't know what the packer margin is because we're not in that industry. We're feeding cattle. We're also, walking our grain off the farm. That's how we market it. So keep in mind, if it makes sense, do it. But if it also makes sense to lock in a profit or protect the downside, do that as well. Options are very cheap. Not saying you have to do something marginable, but do something that protects the downside.
Kyle, thanks for the time this week. We sure appreciate it.
Thank you, Bryce.
We appreciate Kyle's time on the show this week. If you have a question you'd like for me to ask one of the next market experts we have here on Market Journal, email us or get in touch on social media, and I'll be sure to pass your question along. Well, the Cattle Check Ranch north of Hay Springs, Nebraska is a special place to the Cattle Check family and to the Lakota people. That's because it's said that legendary Lakota warrior Crazy Horse camped there nearly a century and a half ago. The pine-timbered pastures where the family custom grazes cattle and logs timber were devastated just a decade ago by the Wellnitz fire. The scars of that historic 2012 wildfire still remain, but the family is now trying a new method of replanting pine trees on their portion of the Pine Ridge. You can learn all about their efforts in the January issue of the Nebraska Farmer. Well, it is now time to get a check on weather with Market Journal weather analyst Bill Boyer. Bill, it's been a heck of a weather week. Earlier this week, some of portions of the state received nearly 20 inches of snow. Is anything like that expected again soon?
Well, that's exactly right, Bryce. We did get some beneficial moisture. I'll answer your question on whether some more is coming here in just a moment. First, look at just north of us in South Dakota, 2 feet of snow in Parkston, just from that last system that came in earlier this week. Up in the Sand Hills, though, 18 inches, Thedford, O'Neill, 14.5 inches in Valentine. Very much needed moisture. How needed? Well, this is where we ended 2022. Of course, those totals are in 2023. Here in the Sand Hills, some of these areas that picked up some of this decent moisture, 7 3/4 inches short for the year. In Valentine, 8-9 inches short in central portions of Nebraska. Look at Hastings, 10, 11.4, and 13 3/4 inches short in Norfolk, just across the border there. Sioux City, almost 14 inches. Over 9 inches short in Lincoln and Omaha, and even 9 inches short in Sidney, almost 6 inches short in Scotts Bluff. Substantially short for those areas because they don't get a ton of moisture in an average year. Some of those areas picked up less than 5-6 inches for the entire year. That's why we continue to see the drought conditions persist here, not only across portions of Nebraska, but down into Kansas as well. The good news is some of these areas here that are in the extreme and exceptional drought picked up some very needed snowfall and moisture from this system. That will help. It's going to take several of those to get us over this multi-year drought. But again, the long-term pattern is for that La Nina to break down, which is going to give us a better opportunity of getting some moisture here. And it starts with what we've already seen. right now, this week, though, I think we're going to focus mostly on the coast. Here across our region, that system that broke apart, moved off to the southeast, continues through tomorrow. Now, as we go into Sunday night into Monday morning, you'll notice the west coast stays very active out in California, very active moisture content there. The rest of the country, pretty dry as we go into Tuesday. This system's going to jump the mountains and emerge out here into our area. Very difficult to forecast where exactly this is going to happen, but into Wednesday morning, we could see some rain and snow, maybe pushing further Wednesday night into Thursday morning, bringing some snow, maybe accumulating snow to portions of the country. Again, where this comes out here could shift north-south. Just know that we do see a system around the Wednesday night, Thursday time frame coming across our region. And then as we get ready to go into next weekend, things again stay active on the coast and pretty dry here in the middle of the country, which as we go today into tomorrow, temperature is going to remain pretty cool. Monday, we see a resurgence of some milder temps into Tuesday as well. And then even into Wednesday and Thursday, those start to retreat a little bit. And then Friday, we start to warm back up. All in all, a pretty quiet week for us. We are going to see some chances of some moisture out there. Better shots to the south and eastern portions of the state where we could see some accumulating snows. Light snows right now. We're not expecting much out of this, maybe an inch or two. Again, continue to check back and see what happens when that storm system finally comes through, where the ultimate placement of that is going to determine how much moisture we're going to get. But I think this week going to be dominated by pretty quiet weather conditions. And the next week looks mild, above normal temperatures favored in our 8 to 14 day outlook, and near normal in terms of the precip department. But take a look at this 30-day outlook taking us through the first month of the year here. Above normal temperatures favored in the eastern portions of the state, but the western portions of the state above normal precip. That is something we like to see in these drought-soaked areas. Again, the 30-day outlook is for above normal precip in portions of the state. Hopefully we can hang on to some of that.
All right, thank you very much, Bill, for that update. Finally, today we have a new edition of our Crop Talk segment. This week we were joined by UNL plant pathologist Dylan Mangiel to discuss potential disease risks for soybeans in the upcoming growing season. Today on Crop Talk, we are joined by Dylan Mangiel. He's an extension plant pathologist. And Dylan, we want to talk to you today about soybean variety selection, an important topic this time of year. As we look back on 2022, what were some of the biggest challenges that soybean growers were facing?
Yeah, producers, it was a dry year, but we still had plant disease issues. So, when we see those disease issues like Phytophthora, root rot, soybean cyst nematode, oftentimes when we see them, it's far too late at that point to make a management response. So really the first time you can address those issues is variety selection that following year.
Let's talk about that specifically here as people are in that point of time trying to make those decisions for 2023. What are some of the best suggestions you can make to producers right now?
Yeah, so the first thing you need to think about is identifying that field history. Always take good notes, pay attention to what's going on, and when you do have a problem, really spend some time or make the investment in identifying exactly what that problem is. Disease management, it's always going to be disease or pathogen specific. So you need to know exactly what you're dealing with before you make a selection and what you're going to do with that.
You talk about identifying that. What are some of the resources available to producers during the growing season to identify exactly what's going on in their fields?
Yeah, so the first thing they could do is take timely samples, making sure they're getting to those problems when they're fresh in the field, when we can identify them properly. And one of the best resources that Nebraska producers have is the ability to send samples to the UNL Plant and Pest Diagnostic Clinic. There they can identify diseases for reasonable rates, and it's worth making that small investment and protecting the large investment that you've made in a field.
So let's say some of our viewers today were dealing with some challenges in 2022. They open up that seed catalog this year. What should they be looking for seed selection? Yeah,
so when you start seed selection, look in that catalog. There's going to be ratings for different diseases. A lot of the traits in there are agronomic traits like standability and emergence. There's nutrient deficiency response traits like iron chlorosis. But the majority of them are disease traits. So commonly you'll see Phytophthora, white mold, sudden death syndrome, soybean cyst nematode, charcoal rot, and frog eye leaf spot. And those are all going to have ratings associated with them. And sometimes you'll see specific ratings on a scale of say 1 to 9 or a number scale, or you'll see different resistance genes. And those are broken up into resistance genes and field tolerance levels.
I think one of the big things here, one of our take-home messages, is important for producers to remember that if they had a challenge over the past year or two, it's important just to bring that up this year and at least make somebody aware of that, right?
Yeah. So the best thing you can do is talk to your local advisors. If you know you've had an issue, if you've taken the time to make that investment in it, ask your local advisors what they have for it. And common ones out there, soybean cyst nematode is found in a lot of fields across Nebraska. If you haven't tested for it already, take advantage of Nebraska Soybean Board funded testing programs through the UNL Plant and Pest Diagnostic Clinic. And if you do have soybean cyst nematode, consider selecting a variety that has a resistance gene for that pest. Those resistance genes, commonly called PI 88788 or peaking. Both of them are widely available, and there's other options showing up in catalogs as well. Phytophthora is another pathogen out there with named resistance genes in the catalogs, and those are all in the catalogs under RPS genes, which stands for resistance to Phytophthora soji, which is the species. And you'll see RPS 1K and 1C commonly. Both of those cover the most common types of that pathogen in Nebraska.
Dylan, for our viewers, Crop Watch is always a good resource for them to get the latest information, especially during the growing season, to turn to when some of those challenges arise. But I want to leave you with the final word. What else do you want to add when it comes to soybean variety selection? Yeah, when you've selected a variety, or when you're considering selecting a variety, don't choose it just based off of one trait. There's a lot of varieties available. So ideally, working with your local advisors, you'll be able to find a variety that has, that pays attention to those agronomic traits as well as the disease traits that you've been struggling with. So don't overlook those problems, and then make the investment in selecting a variety with good resistance for those problems that you're having. It's good value for the extra investment. Oftentimes, disease traits don't come with any premium costs, so it's a free way to add additional value when selecting varieties. Good thoughts, Dylan. We sure appreciate the time.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks again to Dylan for his time this week. If you'd like to learn more about some of the disease and pests that could impact your soybean crop this year, you can find out about just anything you're looking for by visiting cropwatch.unl.edu. Oh, that is all the time we have for this week's show. If you did happen to miss this story, be sure you're following Market Journal on YouTube and on social media to join in on the conversation. We hope to see you back here next time. Until then, I'm Bryce Duskett, wishing you a safe and productive week.
Join Market Journal online at marketjournal.unl.edu. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine. Partial funding provided by the Nebraska Soybean Board. Market Journal is produced by the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources.